When people ask me what my favorite movie is, I can't give them a straight answer, at least not now. I've never watched a movie that has connected with me and resonates with me to the point where I can call it the definitive favorite movie of mine. But with TV shows, that's a bit different. I discovered Mr. Robot back in 2015. I was 13 years old and I watched Mr. Robot with really no expectations. I had no idea what it was about. The reason I actually watched it was because the name seemed appealing to me, Mr. Robot. Just, what could that be about? You know, I'm guessing something about robots. It's not about robots. We'll just clear that up now. I sat down and watched the intro to Mr. Robot and I was hooked. Mr. Robot hooked me faster than any other show I've watched. The opening scene was perfect. It told you everything you needed to know. It gave you enough information about the main character. It showed you that Rami Malek is going to fucking kill it in this role. More on that later. So after watching the intro of the pilot, I binged watched the shit out of this show. And by the end, I was in love. I was in love with everything about this show. The writing, the directing, the cinematography, the soundtrack, everything about it, I loved. But the real reason I loved this show so much and why it later on became my favorite show of all time was because of Rami Malek's performance as Elliot Alderson. Our main lead, portrayed by Rami Malek, is an interesting one. Elliot Alderson suffers from clinical depression and social anxiety, which basically means he finds it hard to talk to people and he's not good at parties. He feels very alienated from the world, he doesn't feel like he belongs, and he might have a few problems going up in there. He doesn't really talk to anyone except for us, the viewer. We are his imaginary friend, as he puts it, and he will narrate to us and his thoughts, his feelings, his emotions, because he can't vocalize this to anyone else, but he can internally release it to us, the viewer. So if you aren't a fan of voiceover, maybe the show isn't for you, but I would still say give it a shot, because here's why. Voiceover usually does get a bad rap in cinema and television, but honestly, I don't get the hate for it. I know some people say it's a cheap way of setting up exposition. In Mr. Robot, it doesn't feel like a cheap way of setting up exposition. It pretty much feels like a way of bringing you into this world. You know, you're kind of just jumping into this guy's life. And he has a very daunting and odd life. And the voiceover is very fitting. And Elliot Alderson is a cybersecurity engineer by day and a vigilante hacker by night. During the day, he seems like your average run-of-the-mill dude, but then during the night, he'll be out hacking people, doing some shit. So what that means is, as I said earlier, he finds it very hard to connect with people. He doesn't talk much. The only way he feels like he can connect with people is by hacking them, by finding out all their dirty little secrets, by finding the worst in them. This is all explained beautifully in the pilot episode. The pilot episode does a very good job of making you understand Elliot's psychosis. You completely understand where he's coming from, and if you don't watch the fucking show. You understand why he thinks certain things. You understand how he operates. He has a very pessimistic and destructive viewpoint on the world. He hates capitalism. Fuck society, as he says in the pilot episode. Mentally, he's a very damaged individual, and that's what makes him so special. Rami Malek's performance grips you in. He is the hook of the show. And once you're in, you're in. The first 2 episodes do focus on Elliot Alderson, but eventually the show does begin to expand and move out and broaden horizons, but for the main part, it's Elliot that grips you in. And so when a mysterious figure by the name of Mr. Robot approaches Elliot and asks him to commit an act of global terrorism that could pretty much put an end to capitalism, we start our show. I don't want to talk too much about the plot of Mr. Robot because the truth is, the plot of Mr. Robot isn't important. And I'm in no way disrespecting the show at all. The creator Sam Esmail said that he doesn't really give a shit about plot. Plot is a device used to explore character. And for a while, I didn't exactly know what he meant by that, but after some thought and consideration, I think I know what he means. What gripped me into the show was Elliot. Elliot being one of the most memorable characters I'll ever watch. A character I've never really seen before, and a character that is our main lead. He is what gripped me, and really, the plot of Mr. Robot is just to explore the character of Elliot and then eventually the characters surrounding Elliot in the show. So I'm choosing not to focus on the plot of Mr. Robot, and I'm going to focus on Elliot and Rami Malek's performance. Rami Malek does an amazing job as Elliot Alderson. Truly an unprecedented job. I have been a fan of Rami Malek since since 2015, and his career is now starting to kick off with Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's only up from here for him. And I'm really glad that he did get a role that he will be recognized for. What Rami can bring to Elliot is unprecedented. Mr. Robot is in no way a light, casual show. It is heavy, it is dense. From the pilot episode, you will see shots of Elliot sitting in his room, crying, because he's just lonely, hearing his internal thoughts. And Rami Malek portrays this character so beautifully. If you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody and you've seen Mr. Robot, you'll know that Elliot Alderson and Freddie Mercury are almost polar opposites. And how Rami Malek and how Rami can just bring that, how he can do that is unbelievable. I really don't know how he's able to pull that off, but he does it. I highly recommend everyone to go watch Mr. Robot. If you hate capitalism, watch Mr. Robot. If you feel lonely and anxious, watch Mr. Robot. If you're into hacking, watch Mr. Robot. If you like Rami Malek, watch Mr. Robot. And the best advice I can give to anyone is pretty much just watch the pilot of Mr. Robot, because for me, the pilot hooked me instantaneously, and that might not be the same for you, but I do recommend watching Mr. Robot. It is my favorite show of all time, and yeah.